welcome fellow horror hounds and welcome to the latest episode of Talk and Stalk, your unholy home for horror. I'm your host as always, Barry, and I'm joined today by my corrupted co-host, the diabolical Darren.
Hi, it's good to be here. Really looking forward to the films we're going to discuss today, so it should be a lot of fun.
Yeah, and today's podcast, we're going to do things a little differently. We're not actually going to be focusing on any one single movie. We're basically just going to be talking about some of the films that actually scared us, that actually terrified our younger selves, be it specific films or specific scenes from films. We're just going to be talking about some of the horror scenes that certainly left an impression with us. You know, some of these scenes proved to be really scary for us, you know, and may actually be responsible for our love of horror. And, you know, for anyone that knows me, I'm a big film buff. I'm into films of all genres. A lot of people probably don't realise this, but I'm actually a massive Disney fan as well. I grew up watching a lot of Disney's animated features quite religiously. You know, Aladdin, Beauty and the Beast and The Little Mermaid being three of my personal favourites. So I'm pretty much into films of all genres, but without a doubt, horror is my favourite genre. Very closely followed by psychological thrillers, and I think it's safe to say, Darren, you're a big horror fan too?
Yeah, pretty much that's all I watch really is horror. I love the old psychological thrillers of the early 1990s and late 1980s, like Fatal Attraction, stuff like that. Yeah. And I will watch other genres of film, but mainly it's just horror really.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm a lot of people probably don't realise, because obviously this podcast channel is actually devoted to horror, but I am into films of all genres. But you know, I've come to realise that there's a massive, huge horror community out there, and so it's certainly the genre that I've decided to focus on. Now, I've probably said this about 9 million times before. When I was younger, it was really my grandmother that let me watch a lot of horror films. My mum wouldn't let me. My dad wouldn't either. Now, my dad's actually a born-again Christian now, and he's completely veered away from the world of horror. But my grandmother, she would. I would spend a lot of, many weekends around my grandmother's, and she'd let me watch horror films till pretty late at night. As I said before, she's very accountable, I feel, for me being a big horror fan. So, and I think that probably the first horror film that I ever saw, certainly the earliest memory I have of a horror movie, is from 1981's An American Werewolf in London.
Right, that's a good one.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure who rented it, but I always remember really only one scene. There was one scene in that film that absolutely terrified me, and that was the werewolf transformation scene. For which Rick Baker deservedly won an Oscar for this movie, and even now, the practical effects hold up tremendously well. That is my earliest memory of a horror film, and I remember just screaming and crying, and I don't know who put the film on, but I was in the room at the time. Please nobody phone up Childline or anything like that. But that's my earliest exposure that I can remember to a horror movie. An American Werewolf in London, which is, one of my favourite 80s horror films. It's certainly, without a doubt, it may actually be my favourite werewolf movie of all time, in fact. But it absolutely terrified me as a kid. I was probably about 5 or 6 years old, I think, when I actually watched that movie. But that's, as I said, that's literally the only scene that I recall. What about you, Darren? What's your kind of earliest memory of a horror movie?
Well, just picking up on what you just said, I haven't got American Werewolf on my list, but it was one that was, funny enough, I don't know why it's not on the list, because I love that film. I remember watching it really when I was really younger. Yeah. And we rented it from VHS, and I was quite fortunate enough that my older sister and her boyfriend used to rent VHS and used to get to watch them, because my mum and dad wasn't exactly big on horror, and they didn't exactly like me to watch these films. Yeah. So prefacing that, my first memory of watching a horror film, and it absolutely captivated me and got me into the genre ever since, was a TV showing of Salem's Lot in 1979.
It's on my list.
Circa 1980
Yeah.
on British TV.
Yeah.
Where do I start with this one? I remember we taped it off the telly, me and my sisters, and I played it religiously,
Yeah.
for months afterwards. But you got the boy floating at the window,
Yeah. Yeah.
scratching at the window, and I don't know, ever since I've seen anyone in a film floating, it kind of freaks me out ever since.
Yeah.
It's really freaky. And yeah, I think I've told this story again on another podcast that I'd done back last year, but we went on a school trip and they put me in the bed by the window, and I was absolutely, not very good with that. You got the rocking chair scene as well.
Yeah, that's creepy.
He goes, "Look at me, teacher."
Yeah.
And the old guy got a crucifix, and I think he ends up having a heart attack.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was mainly my first memory, and it just hooked me ever since.
Yeah, Salem's Lot, as I said, is actually on my list. The floating outside the window scene. Now, I actually saw Salem's Lot after An American Werewolf in London. I realised it was released a couple of years prior to An American Werewolf, but I was probably about 8 or 9 when I saw Salem's Lot. And yes, that scene creeped the hell out of me. I still think it's still one of my favourite vampire films of all time.
I think it is the best of all time.
Yeah, it's certainly one of my favourite Stephen King novels still as well. And that film actually has what I would deem to be probably the scariest vampire that's ever been put on screen.
Oh, absolutely. Barlow.
Yes.
Yeah, funny enough, he's the guy that was in The Bird with Crystal Plumage, played him.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
And you can tell by the facial structure and that. But he's absolutely terrifying at the end of that film.
Yeah, clearly modelled on obviously Count Orlok Nosferatu, which is the granddaddy, very much the granddaddy of vampire films, and actually one of my all-time favourite horror movies, Nosferatu. 1922. But yeah, that scene. Yeah, I mean, we're kind of like in that age now where scary vampire films are very few and far between. You don't really get that many great vampire films coming out in this day and age, and Salem's Lot is one of the very best.
Well, I'm not a big vampire guy, to be honest. I like Fright Night and I like The Lost Boys.
Yeah. Near Dark's good. I like Near Dark as well. That was released the very same year as Lost Boys. What's that?
I've heard good things of Near Dark. I've never seen it.
Yeah, it's good. It was released the same year as Lost Boys, both released in 87. The thing is with Near Dark, it does have a fan base. It does have a bit of a cult following, but it doesn't get as much attention as the Lost Boys. It definitely doesn't. And it's quite ironic, really, because it's a film about vampires, but I'm not sure if you know this, the word vampire is never mentioned in the movie.
No, that's right. Yeah,
and it's directed by Catherine Bigelow, obviously John Carpenter's, now. Sorry, not John Carpenter, James Cameron's ex, who obviously went on to direct the likes of. She directed The Hurt Locker.
Oh, I never knew that.
But yeah, I think Near Dark, good vampire film. But Salem's Lot, that scene really creepy. Another scene. From a film that, again, this is a film that needs no introduction whatsoever. It was released the same year as Salem's Lot, in fact. Now, I was probably about 8 or 9 again when I saw this, and that's Alien.
Right, okay, yeah. Not on my list, but
a classic sci-fi horror film, essentially a slasher movie in space, if you will. A couple of scenes, actually, that terrified me as a kid. Of course, the iconic chestburster scene.
Yeah.
Which, one of the most iconic scenes in horror movie history now. And another scene that really scared me, it really did, is the scene in which, I always remember it, it's Brett hunting around for Jones the cat, and the alien drops from above below him, and he drags him up, and then we just see Jones staring at Brett that always creeped me. Really scared me. Just the design of the alien itself by H.R. Geiger. It's, just one of the greatest horror movie creations of all time, in my opinion.
I think it's very unsettling, the whole film. It starts off, it's quite a slow burn, but it's just becomes so unsettling the more and more you go through the film.
Yeah.
That chest bursting scene, like you say, is absolutely top drawer.
I mean, the emphasis is on suspense. There's a very claustrophobic aspect to it. And, like you said, the chest, but which was a genuine reaction from the cast as well. They knew something was going to happen, they just weren't quite sure what. So it's actually a genuine reaction caught on camera. But that chest burster scene just, really unnerved me. And, the film has quite a few scary moments, if you will. Seeing the face hugger for the first time, I remember that creeping me out.
Yeah,
actually seeing the face hugger, and it's locked around Kane, played by John Hurt. But yeah, that was a movie that left a lasting impression, and it is actually one of my all-time favourite horror movies now.
I like Alien. I am, gonna say that I like Aliens better.
Yeah.
I mean, don't shoot me. But I do like Alien, but I've never been one for like space films or horror in space.
Yeah. Well, I think Alien and Aliens are both great films in their own right. Alien is basically a sci-fi horror movie, whereas Aliens is more of a kind of a Vietnam film in space. Aliens is certainly more of an action film in space. I mean, there are some kind of little horror elements here and there in that. But I think Alien or Aliens quite often comes down to, there's a very big divide. You could line up 10 people. Half of them would probably say Alien, half of them would say Aliens. It's, Ridley Scott did a great job, James Cameron did a great job. Just two different films.
I prefer Aliens, but obviously I can tell what the better film is. Alien is the better film by a long way.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure if I'd go. I don't know, because I think, again, it comes down to really... what I've learned is most horror fans, die-hard horror fans, tend to prefer Alien, whereas the people that are more into kind of action movies tend to prefer Aliens.
Yeah, I can see that.
But yeah, both great movies. But what's another scene or film that scared you as a kid?
Right, I suspect this is probably going to be on your list, but it's a film from 1981, directed by Sam Raimi, and it's The Evil Dead.
Okay. No, The Evil Dead, funnily enough, never scared me.
Right.
No, I love it. A lot of people that, obviously know me, Evil Dead is actually one of my favourite 80s horror films. But no, it's never actually a film that scared me, funnily enough.
Well, that does surprise me, because this absolutely terrified me as a youngster.
Yeah.
There's a few scenes I could go on, basically the whole film is terrifying to me. But the one scene, the tree rape,
yes,
absolutely... Well, what it was, I think we got, in the early days, we was one of the first people to have a VHS, and we got hold of an uncut copy, because I know the scene was cut later in the UK.
Yeah.
But that whole scene is just unbelievable. Where the tree wraps itself around the girl.
Very controversial for its time as well.
Spreads her legs, and then you actually see the penetration scene. Which you couldn't get hold of an uncut copy for a very long time. I think it was certainly in the late 90s, maybe 2000s, before that film became readily available, on DVD, uncut. There's another couple of scenes, quickly I'll just go through. It's when his girlfriend becomes possessed and she starts singing "We're Gonna Get You."
Oh, yeah. Yeah, she becomes very doll-like, doesn't she?
Oh, my God, that's just... that song.
Yeah.
And then you got when Cheryl becomes possessed as well, when they're reading out the cards.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And again, she floats, which is like Salem's Lot for me. It just always freaks me out.
These people, it must be said, these people were floating before Red Bull was about. Before we got these Red Bull commercials, these characters in these horror films could have promoted it.
Exactly. But you don't see many, I don't know about yourself, but I don't see a lot more of floating scenes and stuff like that now. It just doesn't seem to be a thing now. But oh God, it terrified me in the 80s.
No, I can understand. I think I was a little older when I first watched The Evil Dead. I probably was about maybe 13, 14 and that. I loved it, absolutely love it. But I can fully understand, at a younger age, then I think maybe The Evil Dead certainly could have had a kind of an impact on me. But no, I kind of fully get it. I mean, with the doll-like Deadite that you're talking about as well, God, you just want to shut her up, wouldn't you?
Yeah,
stick that duct tape on. She's
and funny enough, I introduced my nephew to it. I think he was about 13 or 14 at the time.
Yeah.
And we've done an all-night marathon where we watched all the Evil Deads up until Army of Darkness, obviously, at the time.
Yeah.
And he had the same reaction. Now it's his favourite film, I think.
Yeah. It is, obviously did a podcast on it a little while ago, Evil Dead 2, Dead by Dawn as well. They're two films that I do love, certainly, and well...
And then you've got the Henrietta scene in Evil Dead 2, but I haven't got that listed.
Someone's in my fruit cellar. I'm not even going to try and do an impression, but
yeah.
So, a film for me, might possibly be on your list, I'm not sure. It's an 80s horror film that I love. It's actually one of my all-time favourite 80s horror movies. And that's A Nightmare on Elm Street, the film that gave us the icon that is Freddy Krueger.
Right, yeah, not on my list. So.
Where do I start? Now, there's one scene in particular. Again, I saw this film at a young age. I was 2 years old when this came out. I was probably about 6 or 7 years old when I first watched this. And the scene that really stood out to me, that actually did give me nightmares, was Glenn's death. Now, Glenn, of course, Johnny Depp, his very first film role, on the bed, pulled into the bed, and obviously we get this massive geyser of blood that comes out. It's a hell of a death. That just terrified the hell out of me, man. Do you know what? I remember going to bed. I was scared to fall asleep. I was scared to go to sleep because, at that age and that, the whole concept of A Nightmare on Elm Street is scary. You fall asleep and somebody's trying to kill you in your dreams. And if you die in your dreams, you die in the real world.
So how old was you when you seen that then?
I was about 6 or 7.
6 or 7?
Yeah.
I got into that film a little bit later, I'd say in 1987, so I was about 15, 16, so it didn't quite have that impact.
Yeah, I young age, and I remember the anthology series called Freddy's Nightmares. I always remember seeing a few episodes of them. Again, this was pretty much 99% of the time, 99% of these films and shows that I watched, it was usually with my grandmother. And she used to watch Freddy's Nightmares, which I believe only ran for a couple of seasons. It's okay. It's not one of the best anthologies out there or anything. But the opening to that show creeped me out. Like, just the opening and the music. And Freddy Krueger scared the hell out of me. Obviously, he became more of a comedy character as the franchise went on. But just the concept is just a really scary one. And, again, a bit that I love, actually, a scene in the movie I love, but did creep me out when I first saw it, was Freddy's tongue coming out the phone. I'm your boyfriend now, Nancy. And then, obviously, he licks her through the phone. Oh, my God. Yeah.
It's a great film. It's one of those films that I watched to death during, I think, the summer of 1987. I just absolutely watched it to death.
Yeah.
I love it. I love that film.
So what's another one for you?
Right, we're coming on to one now which is possibly one of my all-time favourite films ever. It's not a slasher. It's a film from 1979, directed by Peter Medak, called The Changeling.
Yeah.
Wow, very powerful. Probably the best ghost story I've ever seen in a film.
Yeah.
In a horror film. There's a few scenes in this that are really, really creepy. You got the ball where, probably listeners will know the story. This guy, is basically his daughter and his wife have an accident and they're both killed. And he keeps his daughter's ball she used to play with. So, to stop memories and all that, he throws this ball in the river, thinks nothing of it, and then a day or so later, or maybe even be the same night, the ball just bounces down the stairs.
Yeah.
And the scene is absolutely frightening. Going on, to another couple of scenes in the film. You've got the seance scene as well, where the lady's saying, "Did you die in this house?" I remember being absolutely just frozen watching that. And then you got, to me, one of the best scenes in the film is the wheelchair scene at the top of the stairs.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Where it chases the lady, comes hurtling towards the lady.
Yeah.
That film is so underrated. I could talk all day about The Change. I love it.
It's a great film. It is. I think it is widely regarded by many people within the horror community to be one of the best supernatural horror films of all time.
I could not argue with
admittedly, I was a lot older in life when I saw it, so but no, I really appreciate it. It is a film that I really do like. I think I was probably about maybe 18, 19 years old when I first watched The Changeling. I knew of its existence. It just took a long time to get round to watching it. But yeah, because it stars George C. Scott, doesn't it?
Yeah, of Exorcist 3 fame, funny
Yeah,
enough, which is going to come up a bit in a bit.
yeah,
But yeah, I really enjoy it. I think uh, it really didn't get the recognition it deserved
not
for a
upon
long time.
release. No, no.
And I remember watching it. I used to play it on, I think it was like Channel 4 in the 1990s or whatever.
Yeah,
But yeah, that's one I really, everyone should watch that film at least once in their life.
yeah. Yeah, Changeling, yeah, great film. Obviously, I thought it was 1980 it was released.
79, I think. There's a little bit. Sometimes they say 79.
Yeah,
So it might have been released in 80, but I know it was actually filmed in
yeah.
79.
Because I was going to say, the only reason I said that was because The Shining was also
Yeah.
1980. So, like, yeah, and obviously The Shining very much considered a horror classic. Now, yeah, another film here. Now, again, I must have been around about 8 or 9 years old when I saw this. And just the whole movie. The whole experience of watching it for the first time proved to be really scary, and I remember sneaking down from Nan's house, sneaking downstairs late at night, and putting this film on. And the lights were out, volume was cranked up, and this was released in 1968. It's the granddaddy of zombie films, Night of the Living Dead.
Yeah.
Just the whole movie, just the whole film. I mean, just the whole low budget creepiness. The black and white low budget just really adds to the film's creepiness. It's got a very kind of Twilight Zone aesthetic to it. Just the whole notion of, like, as a kid, zombies. The whole idea of dead people coming back to life, walking, just terrified me. Just
You got that
scared me.
opening scene in the graveyard as well.
Yeah. Now, one scene that really did, one scene that proved to be really memorable for me, it's only kind of, it's where the zombies' arms, their hands are actually coming through the boarded up windows.
Yeah,
Which has in itself become quite iconic. For anyone that's a gamer, if they played Resident Evil 2, there's very much kind of a nod to Night of the Living Dead. There's a bit where you're going down the corridor, boarded up windows, and the zombies' arms come through in that. It's just the whole idea and concept of the film. And as I say, I watched this like early hours of the morning. I'm pretty sure it was. And just watching this on my own as an probably about 7 or 8 years old, I think. And, the scene, I remember being really on edge when, for example, Ben goes into the basement. And obviously there's dead bodies in there. The man and the woman, and their bodies are coming to life. And I remember him shooting them, and I remember just thinking, oh God, I hope he don't run out of bullets.
Right,
I just remember being really there with him, really on edge. And, the ending to that film as well is really bleak. He's, spoiler alert, I'm assuming anyone that's listening to this has seen Night of the Living Dead, but, he survives the night only to end up being killed by his own kind, being shot right in the head. He survives the night, he pokes his head out the window in the morning, and he gets shot.
Romero actually said that wasn't done intentionally as like a political statement.
Yeah.
So, I think it just happened. But the scene in that film that I remember is the girl zombie.
Oh, what, when she's stabbing her mum to death with a spade?
Yeah, that's a really good scene.
Yeah.
But yeah, I remember watching that. It was usually on BBC One on a Friday, Saturday night.
Yeah.
Throughout the 80s, the stark, like you say, the stark contrast, the black and white, and then it was like in a graveyard at the start.
Yeah.
It's obviously filmed in daylight.
Yeah.
I think works really well.
Well,
but yeah, it's a classic.
I'm a big fan of black and white. There's a real purity to black and white. My all-time favourite TV series is The Twilight Zone. In black and white, and so many great black and white horror films, being churned out during the period as well. The likes of Repulsion, which is psychological horror. Carnival of Souls in '62, great cult horror film. I'm just a big fan of black and white. Like I said, there's a real kind of sense of purity to it. But Night of the Living Dead, without a doubt, one of the most iconic horror films of all time. I mean, that film essentially kick-started the whole zombie genre. That film set the template.
Oh yeah, we would not have we would not possibly not even have the horror genre as it is today without that film.
Yeah, but yeah, one of the scariest first-time viewings for me, watching that movie. So yeah, what's another film for you?
Again, it might be on your list. It's a film from William Friedkin from 1973,
Yeah, The
The Exorcist.
Exorcist. Yes.
And I've literally it's just literally the whole film. And I remember watching this, and I could not sleep. I had to have the light on for months afterwards, and that's no lie. That's how much this film affected me.
Mm.
I just think it's probably one of the best films ever made, and I mean that in any genre.
Mm.
It's like Suspiria is my favorite film, but I know it's not the best film ever made.
Mm.
To me, that is this film. Where'd you start with this? It's just absolutely brilliant. I think from the moment it starts to the moment it finishes, you've got the iconic scene with the priest, out the window, but the whole effects and everything for the time, it was revolutionary, I think. I think it freaked a lot of people out.
Yeah, it caused a massive impact. For a long time as well, The Exorcist was the highest grossing horror film of all time. For a long time. In 2017, actually took the crown away from The Exorcist. I believe it was a $36 million budget and made $700 million at the box office, which is a crazy amount. But The Exorcist caused, as you say, when that was released at the very end of 1973, nobody had seen a film like it.
I think it was released, like you say, in December, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was actually released just a few days before the new year. So it was at the very end of 73, going into 74, The Exorcist was released, and very controversial. It's really easy to see why that film caused a big impact. And for a film that's nearly 50 years old now, it holds up remarkably well.
Well, like I say, I honestly believe it's the best film ever made, and I know there's a UK critic called Mark Kermode who would pretty much subscribe to that. What more can you say?
Yeah, I mean, I was late. Obviously, the film was banned for a long time. I didn't see the film until I was about 17, 18 years old. So I was quite late in seeing it. As I say, it was very hard to get hold of. It was banned. It was banned for a long time. It caused much controversy. And, a few scenes in the film. There's one scene, actually. There's one scene in particular that makes my stomach churn even now. So God knows what it would have been like nearly 50 years ago. And that's the scene, let's just say it, the masturbation with the crucifix.
Yeah.
It's horrible. It's very visceral. It's,
You can't describe, like you say, like even now, that would shock people. That would have people running, out the cinema or whatever. But, and the way it's done as well, and she's obviously swears a lot throughout the film.
Yeah.
And you didn't really see that at the time, a young girl having to swear. But I think that film really powerful. And depending on how you are, with your Christian beliefs or whatever, that film, for me, people say it's got a negative ending, but I don't feel that way. I feel it's a positive ending.
Yeah, I think, as I say, you can really kind of like dissect that film with so many scenes. I mean, one of the most iconic scenes as well is the 360 head spin. The projectiling pea soup. So many great moments in that movie, and it's the granddaddy of demonic possession films, isn't it?
Yeah, it'll never be surpassed in that genre, subgenre. It'll never be surpassed.
Yeah,
and you've even got the deleted scene that they've done in the director's cut of the spider walk.
Yeah, that's really disturbing. That is. Yeah,
I think so, but yeah. So that's The Exorcist.
Yeah, The Exorcist, horror classic. Again, while it's a film that certainly, as I say, it did have some scenes in it that unnerved me, but because I think I was a little older in life, and I'd already seen a lot of horror films prior to that, but that's taking nothing away from it, because you've got to try and take yourself back to the time of when the movie came out, because let's face it, there's a lot of films out there that don't stand the test of time. The Exorcist does. In my opinion, it does.
And it will in another 50 years' time as well.
So I know there's talks of a remake. I don't know if that's been officially confirmed, but I realise that there are talks of one, and it's not even worth wasting any oxygen on that, is it? Talking about a possible remake.
No, they did do a TV series, but I've never really got to see it.
I've heard some good things about that, actually.
I have as well. Yeah.
All right, another film. Now, there's definitely a big focus on 70s horror films here. Now, this is a film that we talked about on, I believe it was our last podcast together. Don't Look Now, released in 1973.
Absolutely.
It's the climax to this film. One scene and one scene only that creeped the hell out of me. As I mentioned on a podcast before, I was probably around about maybe 8 or 9 years old when I saw this, and there was only one scene that I remember from the entire movie, and that was the climax. That was him chasing, Donald Sutherland's character John, chasing this red-coated figure through the streets, catching up to him, and this red-coated figure standing there, looking at the wall, and then turning around. And that image gave me nightmares. It's
like terrifying as well as being, because you feel such a warmth for the character.
Yeah.
It's heartbreaking as well as, all in one, and it plays with all your emotions.
Yeah.
And I remember the ending, they did spoil on one or two of these, you get these documentaries on Channel 5 or whatever. But I was lucky enough, I'd seen it well before that.
Yeah.
But, that's a great scene.
Yes, well, I looked on the other day when I was actually looking for a picture for Don't Look Now to accompany the podcast, and I clicked on there, and one of the very first images was of that climatic scene. I'm talking, what about spoiler alert? Jesus, because there's people out there that haven't seen Don't Look Now, and if you're looking for an image from the film, it's like you'd expect the poster to come up or something like that, and the very first image that come up was of the dwarf lady that actually turns around, and it was that image creeped me out. I had nightmares for like a couple of nights, and it wasn't until I was about 14, 15 years old that I actually realised what movie that scene came from. And it quickly went on to become one of my favourite psychological horror films, and unnerving.
Masterpiece.
So what's another film for you?
Right, coming after the last one, similar theme, is The Exorcist 3 from 1990.
Okay, which I just bought yesterday on Blu-ray.
Yeah, that's right, yeah, and you got the Arrow edition.
I have,
good,
yeah.
Well, what everyone says about this film is the hospital scene.
Yeah.
Where you got the nurse, I think she's coming out of a room.
Yeah.
And then you've got this figure with these, like, shears-like equipment that's been killing, throughout the film. And it just follows her, and you just can't put your finger on why. It's just so unnerving.
It's a big jump scare scene, isn't it? It's completely unexpected. Yeah, when you first watch it, I've said this before, like, I'm all for jump scares, as long as, a movie isn't over-reliant on them. And it's just one of those moments that you really don't see coming and that. And I'm looking forward to watching the film because it's been about 15 years since I've seen The Exorcist 3. It's been a long time. I remember liking it, though. I remember really liking it.
Oh, it's a film I would play. I usually watch at least twice a year, maybe more.
Yeah.
It's right up there with one of my favourites. And again, it was on release, it was regarded as rubbish. Like, no one really, it flopped big time. But now everyone's starting to jump on the bandwagon and really like it. And it's good because I do think it's, like, really underrated. And there was another big controversy about the two versions as well.
Yeah.
But, I highly recommend people, just because it's a sequel, to a classic film, maybe people won't watch it, but skip part 2, obviously, because that's
Exorcist 2, The Heretic's I just found that a bit of a snooze fest. But yeah, with Exorcist 3 also, I believe it was actually directed by William Peter Blatty, the author of The Exorcist.
Yeah.
So he actually turned his hand to directing, and also as well, I mean, we've got Brad Dourif in there, Chucky himself.
Yeah, we've got Jason Miller.
We've obviously got George C. Scott. And also, it must be noted, there was an American serial killer known as the Gainesville Ripper. His name was Danny Rowland, and he actually murdered 5 students. The movie Scream is very loosely based, in fact, on his crimes. And when he was arrested, he actually claimed there was an evil spirit called Gemini that possessed him. He'd seen Exorcist 3. Must have. Because obviously in Exorcist 3, the killer's actually known as the Gemini killer.
Yeah.
So
and that film is like got sort of slasher undertones to it as well.
Oh, it has, certainly. Yeah.
It's a possession movie. Well, depending on what version you see.
Yeah.
But it's got everything thrown in there. I honestly think it's one of the best films, best sequels ever made.
Well, another film here. This is, again, a film that doesn't really need any introduction whatsoever. I feel like this is a movie that really kind of brought horror to the masses. This is a film that was a huge box office success, really put Steven Spielberg on the Hollywood map. Jaws.
Yeah, I got it as my number 8.
The opening. I always remember, again, I was probably around about maybe 7 or 8 years old when I first watched Jaws, and the opening of the girl being pulled on the water, being dragged about the water, the classic iconic score by John Williams. This is a movie that put a lot of people off going into the water.
Yeah, funny enough, I've got that scene written down.
Oh, you have? Great minds think alike and all that.
Chris's last swim, isn't it? It's known as.
Yeah, Jaws is... I know there's some people that don't call it a horror film. I can get that. To me, it's essentially a monster movie. But in this case, the monster is a great white shark. It has a lot of the ingredients that make up a horror film. Essentially a monster movie at its core. And I always remember a jump scene in the film, the head coming out from the boat when he's underwater. As I say, the death at the beginning, her being dragged about, that was really unnerving. That really was. And
Go on,
yeah,
sorry.
John Williams' just iconic score just complements the film perfectly.
It's like a brutal way to start, a film which, was it PG? No, I don't think it's PG.
I can't actually recall what its original rating was, but a little fact as well, I'm sure a lot of people probably already know this, is that it's the first movie to be dubbed a blockbuster.
Right,
it was actually the first film to ever be categorised as a blockbuster. It was released in the summer of 1975, and it made well over $300 million, which was basically almost unheard of at the time. And in today's money, I believe that equates to over 1.2 bill.
Right.
That Jaws made. Jaws is a film that had a big impact.
I would class it as a horror film. See, I remember watching it back again. A lot of these are 70s, 80s memories.
Yeah.
And it was played one day all the time on TV. But obviously, you're a little bit younger than me.
Yeah.
I remember, every Saturday. It used to be on a Saturday.
Yeah.
And it'd be on the Saturday, and you get your bottle of Coke and have all your popcorn and that.
Yeah.
And every time it came on, it's one of those films you've got to watch.
Yeah.
And it was on last night, funny enough, you say that. It was on about, I think, like 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning last night on ITV4.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a classic. I mean, Steven Spielberg had directed Duel, which I know you've not seen 1971's Duel yet, have you?
No, that's bypassed me so far.
Definitely watch that. Highly recommend. I know some people that like Duel just as much as Jaws, if not more so. Duel's a great movie. The simplest of concepts, but just perfectly executed. And, as I said before, Spielberg proved that he could do suspense even before Jaws. Have you got another film on your list?
Yeah, I've still got a few, actually.
Okay.
One of my favourite sequels, again, ever made. People, I don't know whether they like it or not, it's The Omen 2.
Okay. 1978, yeah?
Yeah, and again, it might be sacrilege, but this is my favourite of the series.
Okay.
You've got a couple of scenes, actually, but one of the scenes, you've got that guy, and he's trapped under the ice.
Yeah.
And you can see him literally under the ice, make you scared of ever going on a bloody frozen pond again.
Yeah.
And another scene as well, which is really unsettling, is the woman who gets attacked by the crow.
Oh, right, yeah.
That scene really disturbed me as a youngster.
Yeah.
You've got the old music, it pecks her eyes out, and then she gets hit by that truck.
Oh, right, yeah.
Which is similar to the ending of another film I got in a bit, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, where you got the hitchhiker.
Yeah.
But I think it's a criminally underrated film, The Omen 2.
It's been a long time since I've seen The Omen 2, in fact. The Omen's, obviously, the first film's an iconic horror movie. It's a film that I really like and that. It has been, The Omen 2 is a film that I do have to return to, because it only came out a couple of years, didn't it, after the first film?
Yeah,
the original was 1976, which obviously has some iconic scenes. Now, the reason I haven't mentioned The Omen or anything, it has got iconic, but, there wasn't any scenes in there that kind of like unnerved me, because I guess with The Omen, I was a little older in life when I saw it. I didn't see The Omen until I was probably about 15 years old. But that film has, the first movie, I certainly, has some really iconic deaths. I do remember the impalement of the, was it a spear?
It's like a church
spire,
spear,
that's
wasn't
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've got just the whole music of the opening in the first Omen.
Yeah.
The music alone is just like terrifying as it is.
Yeah.
And I think you've got, is that the one? I'm not sure. Is that the one with the nanny where she jumped out the window, or is that in Pats?
Yeah, she gets hanged, doesn't she? I believe.
Yeah, that is
in the
Pats,
first film. And of course, you get David Warner. David Warner actually gets decapitated by a sheet of glass.
Yeah, that's a great
scene as well. a great death scene. But yeah, Omen 2, I definitely, that's a film that I need to rewatch. Omen 3 starred Sam Neill, didn't it?
Yeah, The Final Conflict, I believe.
That's right.
That's another good film. That's another underrated film. I've not seen that in a long time, though. Omen 4 was more of a TV movie, and I bypassed that one.
Yeah.
I've never seen that one, but I did see the remake, and I quite liked the remake.
Do you know what the gimmick was for the 2006 remake? Do you know what kind of release date they chose for that film?
Was there something to do 666?
They released it on the 6th of June, 2006.
Yeah.
Yeah. An appropriate release date, but
it's a solid remake, mind. It's obviously people are going to compare it to the original, and it's not a patch on the original, but it's a lot better than people,
It's not the worst remake. It's not the worst.
No,
it's not one of the best, but it's not one of the worst. I mean, admittedly, I've only ever seen it once, but So all right, the next film on my list. Now, I'm getting to the teenage years now. Almost.
Yeah.
There are films I have seen as a teenager that unnerved me, and this film is Black Christmas. Now, I know that Black Christmas was released in 1974. It was 4 years before Halloween. This film was released long before many of the more well-known slasher films, etc. But I didn't see Black Christmas until I was probably 14, 15 years old, and it was on, I believe it was on Christmas Eve of all nights. And it was on late at night, and I remember watching it, and oh my god. To me, Black Christmas is arguably the scariest slasher film out there. The telephone calls are disturbing. The fact that you see very little of the killer himself, you just kind of get a glimpse. The scene that really stands out to me as well is the scene in which he stabs Margot Kidder to death with a glass unicorn.
Yeah.
And he stood over her, over the bed, and you just get that glimpse of an eyeball. And then obviously, before that, we see his eyeball behind the door or the closet. I know we've talked about this before. The very claustrophobic, creepy atmosphere that film has. Black Christmas did something that not many slasher movies have done. It managed to scare me. It unnerved me.
It gets under your skin. It's that type of film. I think it's the best slasher film ever made. I really do. I really like the end scene as well. I think we mentioned it before, where you got, the girl up in the attic.
Yeah.
And then you got just the phone rings.
Yeah.
And then you've got this, I think it's Silent Night, is it? Or you got one of the songs then playing out the credits. That's just a fantastic film.
Yeah, just that whole kind of, and this is going to kind of get me on to another film soon, which is actually the most recent film on the list. There is one film on this list that I'm not saying it's one of the best horror films of all time or anything like that, because it isn't, but it's pretty underrated, a little overlooked, I'd say, and it's from 2001, and there's moments in the film that really creep me out, really unnerve me, and Black Christmas has an aspect of them. What I really find creepy in Black Christmas is this killer seems to have this kind of whole multiple personality thing going on, talking in different voices.
It's realistic.
Yeah,
that's what it is.
And obviously we get these shots of, for example, the first victim, Claire, who's put in the rocking chair, and he's up there singing her a lullaby, pushing it. It's creepy.
Yeah, absolutely.
What's the next film on your list?
Right, I got a film from 1982 called The Entity.
Oh, do you know what? Oh, yeah, I didn't think about The Entity, but that would have actually made my list. That's a pretty disturbing film.
I remember watching it as a kid, and we rented it quite a lot.
Yeah.
Back in the early 80s, and obviously the scene I'm going to mention is the rape scene by a ghost.
Yeah.
Which, well, yeah, something that's never been done at the time. It was actually regarded as a true story.
Yeah, it's
now,
supposed
I don't know
to
the
be.
facts of that.
Yeah, it's supposedly. I always take these kind of true story things with a pinch of salt. I don't know how accurate it is to the events that were told, but I realise that over the years, that almost in itself becomes a selling point for a film.
I think it did at the time, yeah.
Yeah, but it is supposedly based on actual events, it is. And if that is the case, if this is true, completely true, then it's completely and utterly terrifying.
I did going back, but it was years ago, like a little bit of research on it, and there was a true case that it did happen. Because they set up cameras and everything, and they caught obviously they didn't catch a ghost per se, but they did catch supernatural paranormal activity, which was quite, at the time, is just, as a youngster, I remember watching that scene, the whole film in general, and just absolutely, well, what can you say? A 10-year-old watching that just do things to your head.
Yeah, The Entity, it's a disturbing movie due to the subject matter. And
a very underrated film as well.
Yeah, it doesn't really get talked about that much, to be honest. It's pretty disturbing. I'm one of them people, not to go too into detail and whatever. I hate seeing sexual assault. I hate it. It's rape in movies and that. I'm not going to go through the films, but things like I Spit on Your Grave, and there's many more. And The Entity, yeah, from what I recall, I was probably about 9 or 10 years old when I watched that film, and it was pretty unnerving.
It stays with you.
Yeah.
There's scenes in that film that absolutely stay with you.
Yeah.
I think it's like Barbara Hershey was the main actress, and I think she pulls off that character fantastically well.
Yeah. Another film, now this is a film I did a podcast on a little while ago. I think this is a film that's pretty underrated. I think this film is very, very overlooked, in fact. And it's a film released in 1978 called Magic, starring Anthony Hopkins. I find dummies generally quite creepy. And Magic, I think Fats the dummy in Magic is probably the creepiest dummy we've ever actually had grace the screen. And I saw this film probably again around 7 or 8 years old or so. My mum actually owned it on VHS. And just the dummy, Fats. And again, the film is really at its core about paranoid schizophrenia. He obviously believes that Fats is alive. He's talking to Fats. And it's the interactions between him and Fats. It's just really creepy. I mean, the thing is that there's one scene in particular that has never left my mind, and I actually think it's one of the creepiest scenes in the movie, and that's where Anthony Hopkins' character Corky, he takes the guy out, he presumes he's dead, and he takes him out to the water, and we see Fats looking out the window. The dummy is sat there by the window watching him.
Right. So it's a film I've never seen.
Oh, okay. I don't want to go. All right, I don't want to go into spoilers.
No, I don't mind spoilers. I'm not one.
Yeah, watch Magic. It's a creepy film, but Anthony Hopkins plays a sympathetic character, much in a way like Norman Bates. He's a guy that you can't help but kind of feel sorry for, because he clearly. I don't want to go into details, but he can't exist without Fats, the dummy.
Right.
Him and the dummy become one. And Fats the dummy, who's actually modelled on Anthony Hopkins, actually unnerved Hopkins so much so that he almost left the film.
Was this kind of a remake to Dead of Night from 1945?
No. But there are, there's parallels certainly.
Oh, right.
It's Magic is often kind of compared, but no, it's not like a remake or anything like that. But they're two films that borrow very similar themes. You could say it was certainly influenced by Dead of Night. The ventriloquist dummy segment, I think, being the standout, the best segment of that movie, actually. The final segment. But no, Magic is, as I said, a great psychological horror film. There's a lot of scenes in the film. There's a scene where he goes into the bathroom and Fats is talking to him from behind the door. And he's like, poke your head out here, look out here. And Fats is just sitting there in the chair, just staring at him. It's creepy.
And of course, James Wan went on to do Dead Silence, and films like that have riffed off that, I would imagine.
Yeah. Dead Silence, I think, is kind of a fun horror film. I think that's quite underrated.
I do as well. I think it's one of the best films of the 2000s for me.
Yeah, I do like it. It definitely does. It does actually have a little bit of a fan base, though. It does actually have a bit of a cult following, though. I've come to notice that. I think generally among the mainstream, it's a horror film that really doesn't get talked about much, but there is a bit of a fan base, and, everyone, the name James Wan comes up, everyone thinks, obviously, he did direct the first Saw in 2004.
Yeah.
But Dead Silence is one of the films that, a lot of people don't talk about when they think of James Wan. But yeah, magic. But as I said, the sitting there in the chair scene, him looking out the window, so presumably, Corky has positioned him near the window so he can watch. It's creepy. So what's another film on your list?
Right, I got two more left, but if you've got more, we can go through them anyway. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, 1973. I think it's been talked about to death, everything, and all that, but the whole film is just unnerving. Pretty much the scene I'm going to point out is the ending, where, you got the chase scene with Sally.
Yeah.
And you've got the hitchhiker who gets run over. Spoilers, but everyone's seen this anyway. Yeah. And then you got Leatherface when the whole chainsaw goes into his leg.
Oh, yeah.
And then he gets up and then he chases, and this guy stops in this big, lorry type thing, and it's just carnage throughout that scene. It's if anyone who just come in off the street and actually, or walked into a room with that film playing must be thinking, what the hell?
Yeah.
What an ending that is. So powerful.
Well, I think the scene leading up to it is pretty unnerving when obviously she's sat tied to the table. Yeah. And they're all kind of like laughing with her, and it does a close-up shots of her eyeballs, and it's just complete and utter chaos. The whole scene is just chaotic.
Yeah, another great scene, with Grandpa.
Yeah.
But another scene in the film, when we first see Leatherface, and he comes out with those steel doors.
Yeah, and he obviously smacks the guy across the head with the sledgehammer, and then, drags him off and, shuts them doors.
That squelch of that sledgehammer, I don't know about you, I can barely watch that scene. It goes through me.
Yeah. So, well, that was our introduction, wasn't it? That was the first time we ever got a look at Leatherface. It was, completely unexpected.
Yeah.
And, it's a great shot. I actually talked about it in a podcast, actually, a while back, of some of my favourite first and / opening kills in horror movies. Right. That was actually in there. I did actually put that in there.
So. But again, it's just a classic. I don't think that film will ever be, because there's a film coming out this year as well, another remake.
There is. I've lost interest for the Texas Chainsaw franchise now. How many stops and starts do we need? It's just
I think they're going to just basically do this one as a follow-on to the original.
We'll see. We'll see how it goes. Expectations are not high by any means, but cautiously optimistic. I just haven't liked the last two Texas Chainsaw films.
Didn't you like Texas Chainsaw 3D then?
I saw it the once. I remember it being kind of okay. But I've only seen it the once. I don't remember particularly liking it, but it wasn't the travesty, for example, that the Next Generation was.
There's a few scenes in the film, and they got the continuity all wrong with the girl, her age and all that. But if you watch it, and I recommend you to watch it again, but watch it as a fun slasher film.
Yeah.
Maybe just, maybe, I don't know, when you watched it the first time, whether all the hype and all the people... But not so much hype, but all the people slagging it off got into your head.
No, I think I went in blind. I think I didn't look at any reviews or anything.
Okay.
Yeah, I think with Texas, I love the original, and released in '74, which the very same year as Black Christmas. Two of my favourite '70s horror films actually released in the very same year. Texas Chainsaw was early '74, and Black Christmas was at the end, actually released around Christmas time.
Well, it's no surprise that you've got a lot of these lists. You've got The Exorcist as well, which was roughly a year or two in it. And it's no surprise that a lot of these films are 70s films, because I think that is the best decade.
Yeah.
A lot of people hack on about the 1980s and all that, and I love the 1980s. Don't get me wrong, but I think the 1970s is where it's at.
Yeah, the 80s did have a lot of great horror films, certainly, without a doubt. A lot of classics. And there was a lot of franchises really starting up in that time as well. We saw a lot of 80s franchises. You know, we had Nightmare on Elm Street going at that time. We had Friday the 13th going at that time. We had Halloween's going. There was a lot. Child's Play obviously started in the late 80s. You know, among countless others. But, you know, yeah, the 70s is probably my favourite decade in the history of horror. Now, the next film on the list, we're going a little more modern now. This is a 90s horror film. And I was 16 years old when I saw this. And I found just the sense of atmosphere, the sense of dread that this film had. And I think this film actually has what I deem to be one of the more iconic horror scenes in all of horror. And that is Ring, the Japanese original. It is one of my favourite Asian horror movies. The scene in which Sadako comes crawling through the TV. When I first watched that at the age of 16, it creeped me out. The whole movie, though, there's just this sense of uneasy atmosphere that this film has. This film isn't reliant on cheap jump scares or anything like that. It's just the atmosphere, this real kind of creepy tone that kind of permits the film.
Yeah.
And obviously there was a remake in 2002, which I'll admit, as horror movie remakes go, it's one of the best examples out there. I do think the 2002 Ring is actually a good remake. Again, you could say completely unnecessary, but there's a lot of people that don't watch foreign language films, so what do? They remake it for a Western audience. But yeah, Ring is...
I've not seen the original.
Okay. It's better, in my... You know, it's the better film, because, as I said, with the 2002 version, I mean, obviously, it's kind of Hollywood-fied somewhat. You know, it's a bigger budget and all that. But it was well made. But in comparison, the original just has that kind of lower budget, that kind of more uneasy atmosphere about it.
Yeah.
And just her coming through the TV, that was the moment that, wow, that really unnerved me. And there was actually another little scene, just a quick little moment in the film as well, that actually made me, I remember this like it was yesterday. I remember pausing the film and looking behind me. It just made me feel uneasy. There's a moment, she's just finished watching the videotape, which is actually quite creepy in itself, and she just sees a shadow of a figure stood behind her.
Right.
Very quickly, she turns around and there's nothing there. Now, if that was a James Wan film, that'd be a jump scare.
Yeah.
That would be a jump... They turn that moment into a jump scare. But there is no jump scare here. It's literally, we just quickly get a glimpse of a figure stood behind her, and she looks round, and there's nothing there. And that unnerved me. That creeped me out.
I think my nephew absolutely champions the original series. Like, I think he's 30 years old, so he's not really that age type to go back to that. But he loves the Ring films. He loves all the Japanese horror and that.
Yeah.
But I can't really comment. I've only seen the remake, and I like you say, it was fair film. It was good enough.
Yeah, well, a lot of Asian horror films have been churned out since. We've had countless, Asian horror films with long-haired girls and that. It's the common trope. It's very much become the common trope of Asian horror films. Yeah, The Grudge, which again, The Grudge could have got in here as well, because when I first watched The Grudge, that was actually a film that scared me. I think it's a pretty effectively scary Asian horror movie, as is Shutter as well. I mean, I'm talking about other films here that I didn't write down.
That's another one my nephew mentions all the time. He's saying you've got to watch Shutter.
Shutter's, it's a Thai horror film. Again, I do think it's one of the better Asian horror films out there. It did actually have a remake starring Joshua Jackson, which is, okay. It's watchable. But again, I don't think any US remake has topped the Asian original. But I think 2002's Ring is the one that's come closest.
Yeah.
So what's the final film on your list?
Right, 1976, Brian De Palma. Carrie.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, absolute. I think this is one of the best supernatural horror films ever made. The one for the obvious scene for me is the end scene, where they set her up and she just basically all her supernatural powers come out, and she starts killing people and just creating havoc from start to finish. I think the whole film is generally, really creepy and really, watching it as a youngster will freak you out. Massive fan of De Palma. I think it's been known on this podcast as that, Dressed to Kill and all that. But I think Carrie is absolutely, what's the word? It's really original for its time, and it really set the standard really high for that type of film.
Yeah, well, we have Stephen King to thank for the novel, which obviously, a couple of years prior in that. But, yeah, it's very well made, isn't it? And, is there any scenes specifically, aside from, like, the prom scene, are there any scenes that really kind of stand out to you in it?
Well, a scene, not so much for the horror, but the shower scene at the start, I remember watching it.
I bet you do, pervert, ain't you?
Yeah, I think my dad turned it off.
Yeah.
So, funny enough, I actually did not get to see the film. So that would have been when I was 9 or 10. But I didn't actually get to see the film until I was about 15, 16.
Yeah.
And just the whole, the bullying aspect and all, and everything. Because a lot of people can relate to that. I just think it's a really cruel, really, it's really hard watch at times.
She's, I think Sissy Spacek is fantastic. She was actually Oscar nominated for that role. Didn't win, but she's perfect. I think it's perfect casting.
And you've got her mother as well.
Pippa Laurie.
Yeah, she was in Trauma, I think, from Dario Argento.
Yeah.
And I think she was in The Hustler as well, but that's not a horror film. But the actual acting as well in that film is great. You've got PJ Soles as well.
Yeah, and Nancy Allen, of course.
That's right, even though I think probably that is her best acting credit, because it's well known that I don't think she's a particularly great actress.
The final scene, the bloodied hand coming out the grave, obviously that's become pretty iconic, hasn't it?
Well, yeah, Friday the 13th being, one that ripped that off. And I think, numerous other films have ripped that scene off since.
Yeah.
Freddy versus Jason, or was it...
Jason Goes to Hell Final Friday.
Yeah, sorry, yeah.
Which got fans really excited, and then 10 years later, we obviously did get Freddy v Jason. But yeah, I think Carrie's one of the best 70s horror films, and despite being, it's the very first Stephen King novel to be made into a film, and it's still one of the very best.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't say enough high things about Carrie.
Basically, I've just got kind of two left. One is, now, this is probably the most divisive horror film of all time. We're going to have to wrap this up pretty soon, but The Blair Witch Project.
Yeah,
released in 1999. It's the film that really, it was the big commercial success of this that really kind of opened the floodgates for found footage films to follow. It creeped me out. Do I think it's, I'm not saying it's one of the scariest films ever made, but, this was released at a time when we hadn't really seen found footage films before. There was Cannibal Holocaust, like 20 years earlier. But there was a level of authenticity to it. It really felt like you're watching real people in a real situation. And, needless to say, the marketing, played a huge part in this film's big success.
I think the internet was hitting at the time, wasn't it? The internet had just come out.
Yeah.
Or certainly was the most popular it'd ever been from the start. And then done this really good campaign. They even made a documentary called The Curse, I think. It's called The Curse. So that set up the whole film. It's a classic. I really like the film a lot.
It is divisive. The Blair Witch Project is, I'm going to say, the most divisive horror film ever made. I firmly believe that. Some people love this and really like it. Some people hate this film. I know people that absolutely hate this movie, that find it absolutely so goddamn boring, so overrated. They really don't get the fuss. It's very much a psychological horror film. There's no jump scares. There's no effects or anything. It's literally three people, with a camera. And, as I said, yes, the marketing played the big part in his success and stuff. But when I saw this at the cinema, I just felt what I was watching was real. I felt immersed because it actually felt genuine.
It's very clever. It's very clever film, you know. Like you say, you had the likes of Cannibal Holocaust, and maybe before that you had like Peeping Tom, who sort of touched upon, you know, that style.
Yeah.
But this film, yeah, it's revolutionary for its time because, you know, a lot of people, I believe, who really don't like the film, I think, have actually come into the film knowing that it wasn't real.
Yeah, I think admittedly the film has
sense.
lost probably much of its power now since we know it's not real. For example, but I still commend it. It's a film that I still really like, you know, and you know, as I said, it's just kind of like, it was just that feeling of I'm sitting there in the cinema and it kind of felt like, hang on a sec, is this real? Am I actually watching real missing footage here? It's simply because it kind of existed at a time when these films are a dime a dozen now. The found footage subgenre has become one of the most oversaturated subgenres in all of horror, and quite quickly as well. But it's easy to see why. These films are generally very cheap to make, so they're almost guaranteed like some degree of profit, however small.
Yeah, funny enough, I've done on the last podcast I've done with my nephew. We've done an episode on found footage, and I made up like a list of 10 films, and I struggled just to find 10 that I liked.
Yeah, I mean there are quite a few I do like, admittedly, but the Blair Witch Project may still very well be my personal favourite. You know, but now I'm going to talk about the last film now, actually, because I know this is a film that you've seen. I know you wasn't really that keen. I don't know a huge amount of people have seen this movie. Now, just remember, this list isn't me listing the best horror movies of all time, even though some of the films we have talked about, I do believe, are some of the best horror films of all time. But this is from a 2001 psychological horror film called Session 9.
Right, okay, yeah.
What really creeps me out in horror, what I find to be a really disturbing / creepy theme, is multiple personality disorder.
Yeah.
It unnerves me. And in Session 9, you know, we get a group of people that are basically getting rid of an asbestos in an old abandoned mental institution. So, you know, potentially you've got what makes for a creepy setting. Mental institutions generally make for, you know, creepy settings in horror. But they actually find some of the recordings of some of the interviews with some of the patients. And there's one patient in particular who exhibits multiple personality disorder, and it's them recordings. It's them recordings. One of the characters finds these tapes and actually listens to the interviews with this patient, and they have different personalities. That really creeps me the hell out. It really does. There's actually a YouTube... It
is creepy, yeah.
There's a YouTube video that I watched the other day, and it was all it was is of the recordings. Somebody's basically just done all the recordings and putting them into one YouTube video, and I struggle to get through it. It actually makes me feel really uneasy. There's just something about multiple personality disorder, dissociative identity disorder, that I find really creepy. As I said, Magic at its core is a film about that. Even Psycho, him talking, you know, to his mother. His mother's dead, but, you know, obviously the character of Norman Bates was very much modelled on Ed Gein, who had a very kind of unhealthily close relationship with his mother. But, you know, still having conversations with her, you know, while she was dead. Session 9, it's them recordings. I mean, the movie itself I like. As I said, I don't think it's one of the best horror films of all time or anything like that, but I do definitely think it's a horror film worthy of more attention. I don't think enough people have seen it, and I actually like the fact that it's actually set in a real-life institute as well.
It's a very creepy setting. Yeah, I'll give it that. The thing with the film for me that didn't quite work is that I was seeing it a lot on some people's like top 10 lists of horror films ever. Okay. And I think I went into it expecting too much.
Yeah, the problem is hype can often destroy a product. It can be a product's own worst enemy.
Yeah, I didn't hate it. I didn't hate it, and I do find those scenes you mentioned really creepy. Yeah. There was something missing for me. I don't know. Maybe it was the hype.
Well, I rented it on DVD. Psychological horror is actually my favourite subgenre. Most people assume, because I absolutely love Scream and Halloween and Nightmare on Elm Street and all that, that slash is my number one. It isn't. psychological horror is my number one subgenre. I love films that are very cerebral. I love films that kind of probe the recesses of the mind, and Session 9 is one of them films that does that. And I'm just creeped out. I am just so goddamn creeped out when I hear different voices coming from one person.
Yeah.
It gets to me. It actually makes me, feel uncomfortable. And Session 9 has quite a few scenes in the film that we hear this one woman. She has a personality of a little girl and the personality of a little boy, and there's an evil little boy living in her, and I just find it really unsettling. So I think Session 9 is... Now, at the end of the day, there's going to be a lot more scenes from various other horror films, but we weren't going to try and turn this into a 20-hour podcast. There's a lot more scenes from horror films that we love. There's scenes that probably do creep us out and unnerve us. But I just wanted to try and condense this into the scenes that I could think of. The scenes that really did kind of have an impact with me.
Well, if people do generally like this conversation that we're having, then we can always come back and do another one. Because like you say, the list could be endless.
Well, 1990s, It, the TV miniseries. Pennywise talking to young Georgie in the drain pipe. That's another scene. That's I was 8 years old when that came out, and I actually saw it when I was 8 years old, and that was creepy. That really creeped me out, and I can fully understand why people are scared of clowns. I think for even people that weren't scared of clowns, watching it probably gave them a fear of clowns.
Well, you got the clown scene in the Poltergeist as well.
Yeah,
that's another one.
Yeah, that's another one. There's so many. But if I had to really put down one scene, now bearing in mind this was probably obviously the first horror film I ever saw, the one scene that absolutely traumatized me upon watching it, it was the werewolf transformation scene, American Werewolf in London.
Yeah, I agree. It's funny I didn't have it on the list, but I assumed you would have it anyway. But what a scene that is. People, I've had arguments with people who say that the Howling scene, transformation is better.
I disagree, but the Howling's...
I'll die on a hill.
Yeah, the Howling's got great effects, certainly. Because that was, the effects, ironically, I think we talked about this before, didn't we? The effects were by Rob Bottin, who was actually a student of Rick Baker. Rick Baker did the effects for An American Werewolf in London. Rob Bottin, his student, did the effects for The Howling.
And the Howling effects are good, and
they are.
Take nothing, away from the film.
Yeah.
But I do think that American Werewolf in London is the better film.
An American Werewolf in London, I think, has the best werewolf transformation scene in the history of horror.
Yeah,
in my opinion.
You just said it all there in one sentence.
Yeah,
definitely.
There's also quickly, just before we wrap this up as well, to a film that's a lot more modern. 2007, wasn't released till 2009. The werewolf transformation scene in Trick or Treat was great.
Yeah, that's another film.
The women, obviously, in a big twist, they turn out to be a pack of werewolves. It was mainly practical. I think they kind of overlaid it with CG, but not to the point of it being jarring. That was a great werewolf transformation scene where they're transforming around that campfire, that fire, to the song "Sweet Dreams Are Made of This" by Marilyn Manson.
I think it's that film should have got a theatrical release.
Yeah,
it's criminal that it never really.
No,
because...
but I think Michael Dougherty in that and said Bryan Singer, they just wanted this film to be for the fans. This wasn't a film that they designed to make. Originally, the plan was a theatrical release, and then they decided, no, do you know what? Straight to DVD/Blu-ray. But it has a big cult following, and it's good to see. This film does actually have quite the fan base.
It's one you've just got to put on every Halloween.
Oh, yeah, it's perfect Halloween. This and 1978's Halloween are perfect companions for a Halloween night.
See, I've watched Halloween to death, and it's got to a point now where I'll watch it if it's, on television and that, but I won't go out of my way. Okay. I sort of kind of, if Halloween season's coming up, whenever now, I'll put on a sequel instead.
Yeah.
But that's take nothing away. Halloween is a great film, don't get me wrong. But I do like Halloween too, a little bit more, probably.
We're going to have to wrap it up for today. Thanks a lot to everyone that listened. That was really good fun, actually. Brought back so many memories.
I enjoyed that. A lot.
And fortunately, even though all of these horror films and that have, some of these films absolutely terrified me as a kid, if it wasn't for these films, I probably wouldn't be a horror fan now.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, as John Carpenter once said, it's all about, kind of safe scares. It's great to be scared, but you feel safe at the same time. It's not like these things can come out the TV to get you.
Exactly.
Exactly. So, So thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for everyone that listened, and we'll be back again soon to haunt you and torment you. And if you've liked what you've heard, please feel free to subscribe to my channel. We're actually doing a podcast on 1960s Psycho in a couple of days' time. So we'll be popping into the Bates Motel, taking a shower. Not together, mind. But
oh no, gotta put that in.
No, we're gonna be in separate rooms. Don't worry. But so take care.
Yeah, and we'll see you all real soon.
Adios for now.